Welcome to today's webinar on ISO 42001. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. We won't start just yet. We'll just wait a minute or so for everyone to join. So if you want to get that last coffee, quick toilet break, or anything else like that, maybe a biscuit before lunch, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So just ease into the day, and we'll start in a minute or so. So just take it easy. People starting to join, just as I said at the beginning of the webinar, we're going to start their webinar in about a minute or so. Let everyone just ease in as much as you can. And once we start the next minute or so, then we can go from there. Just waiting for the last people to sort of join. We've got about 32 individuals joining now. We had I think about 200 people registered, so hopefully more to come in the next couple of minutes. Probably people leaving meetings. The lovely 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock meeting, which is always just before lunch, if you will. Perfect. Well, we're going to start now. We're 2 minutes in. So thank you very much, everyone who's joining now and joining to come. My name is Charles Beecroft. I am the training manager for NQA. I have the utmost pleasure to be hosting this webinar today by three very eminent experts on ISO 42001. So I'll just introduce them by name, and I'll give an opportunity for each of them to discuss about their experiences, backgrounds. But we have joining us today, we have Robert Clements, Dr. Paul Stevens, and we have Adrian Brissett from NQA. And just to go through in terms of what the actual breakdown of what we were looking today, they'll be discussing obviously a variety of topics linked to ISO 42001. I'll be facilitating this as well. And if you do have any questions, please use the question or the chat function on the GoToWebinar page. Put them in. Everyone here has access to questions, but I will be looking for the questions as well, and I'll be sort of choosing those relevant ones for the topics we're discussing, and any questions that I can answer as well in a brief detail. I can also be typing that in the chat. But without further ado, I'll let Robert just explain who he is and his background, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Charles. My name is Rob from Ascent Risk Management. We are consultants in the risk management area, and obviously 42001 is of great interest to us and our clients at the moment, who are starting to use and develop AI technology. So at Ascent, we have worked with some clients to take them through the process. We've done lots of gap analysis. We've learned lots of lessons. So first time you do something like this, you learn a lot. And I'm really looking forward to today's webinar and seeing the questions that come through from you guys that are watching, to see how you're thinking about this and the questions you've got. And a big thank you to NQA for hosting.
Amazing. Thank you, Rob. And Paul, please go ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charles. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, no, myself as well. We are here representing ISO, a consultancy and software business supporting clients with multiple ISO standards. So obviously 42001 is really interesting for us and our clients. I'm really here to talk about our journey though. ISO has just been through the process of gaining accredited certification, something we're super proud of. It was a really interesting journey. We've learned an awful lot on the way. So I'm here really to talk about it from almost a client's perspective and some of the things we've learned. But yeah, thank you NQA for hosting, and looking forward to having a good chat about the journey.
Amazing. And congrats on that, by the way, for going through that process as well, I guess. And we can discuss that in more detail hopefully in today's chat. But last but not least, our very own NQA, Adrian Brissett. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Charles. And yes, an honour and a pleasure for me to be on this webinar. So I've been with NQA for a year now, roughly, and I've been fortunate to have gained some really great standards around ISO. That's 42001, obviously what we're talking about today, 27001 information security management systems, quality management 9001, and also environmental management 14001. All great standards. So prior to being at NQA, I was finished a master's degree in cybersecurity. Very proud to say that I achieved a distinction, and I would say that it was really to do with a dissertation I worked on around machine learning, and it was around how cybersecurity could be, especially phishing, could be a tool, and AI could enable bad actors to enhance their phishing attempts. And so therefore my model was based around detecting phishing, which is really generated by Gen AI, and that was my dissertation. So I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, all three of you. Yeah, well, let's get straight start into the webinar. So I think the first topic we're discussing is, I mean, the best place to start. What is ISO 42001?
We're all being too polite, aren't we? We just need to dive. Well, Adrian, no, you first, please.
So it's fair to say it's the very first global standard for artificial intelligence management system published in 2023. Now, in the previous webinar we did many months ago, myself and NQA, we started on a quote from the standard itself, where it said AI was increasingly applied across all sectors, utilizing technology and expecting to be one of the main economic drivers, and the consequence of that is that it may give rise to societal changes. And it's fair to say, I think we would all agree that it will give rise to societal changes. So I think it's a fundamental standard, and one which we've all embraced, all of the participants. Sorry, over to you, Paul.
Yeah, I was just going to say, very much for us going into this, probably somewhat naively, in my mind, it was about the AI. But what as you go through the journey of getting this certification, it's about the people, it's about the use of AI, it's where it's happening in the business, it's what people are doing with it. And we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but the shadow AI, it was a real eye-opener for us on how much was actually in place, potentially being used, where it was being used. And I think for every company we've spoken to, that's been one of the biggest eye-opening experiences, actually how much AI is there now and in how many different forms. So yeah, for us it's a tool to help us spot, manage and keep track of the AI across Advisor, and to make sure we're using it and it's managed, not just as many of us are experimenting, playing around with it, giving it a go. It's a really good tool for controlling the way you use AI. Sorry, Rob, I'll probably nick some of your points there, but
no, not at all. I mean, we've had some discussions in prep for this, and I think we all agree on that. I think that's a really good point. It's not a highly technical standard where you have to go into the code and into the models of the AI. It is more about the governance, the management, and the ethics around how you're using and building your AI tools, which makes it accessible to everyone. And I'm sure there's many compliance managers and those type of roles watching. So you don't need to be a technical expert, it's still the same structure. And the other point that I'll make there is it's a management system standard. So if you haven't looked at it already, when you look at the contents page, you will recognise the structure the same as 27001, 9001, 22301 for business continuity. So on that basis, really easy to integrate into an existing system.
So that's exactly what we did. So we have 9001, 14,001 and 27 already. We've integrated it into a single management system. So yeah, really good point, Rob. It's not a brand new standalone, completely independent. It fits very well, it aligns with the other standards, and it means you can have that efficient single compliance environment, but covering a wide topic of things. And a lot of these things interact, the quality, the information security, and the AI. There's similar risks, similar controls. So it's yeah, definitely worth. The integration is a very good way to go. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the point of integration, there are some common themes across the two, aren't there? And what was your experience, Paul, between, I guess, 27001 is probably in a way most similar, and there's some crossover there, but you obviously had a separate audit for this when they came in just to look at.
Separate because of the independent audit, but following very much the same structure. I think we're looking forward to next year bringing this all together into one one audit across the entire IMS. I think that's not really been possible just yet because of where we are with the UCAS accreditation. But into next year, we will be looking for one audit as well as one system. A lot of time saved. You're right, but there's think about this. I'm probably not going to be able to explain this very well, but there's also elements of 14001 where you're looking at the life cycle perspective. So you're not just looking at it there and then how it affects you. You are looking at a different stage of the life cycle. So there's elements of all the standards that really come into play. And if you're using AI and using it efficiently, you can make environmental energy improvement savings, although you're contributing to AI, which we know is very energy demanding. So it does all merge together, I think, really well and help you look at it from the wider perspective, not just with one individual hat on.
Oh, just to go in there, apologies though, we just had a question from the group, which you might be able to see in the chat. I'll read it out for everyone involved. I think it's from Trish. Have you benchmarked your unified manager system? The example being PAS 99.
So PAS 99, I think, is a well-aged standard, isn't it, for the previously integrating them, which I completely understand why you would ask that. So I think if I give some context now, there's a format called Annex SL or Annex L from ISO, where the standards all align with common text and common titles. Obviously, what's within those clauses is different depending on what hat you're wearing. So if you're wearing your AI hat, obviously you're thinking from the AI perspective. Whereas information security, which is slightly different, although there's crossovers, you'd wear that. So, so yeah, in terms of benchmarking, there's a lot of common elements, as we've already said, and where we've worked with clients to take them through this, they've mostly had an existing system already, so ISO 27001 most commonly. And also we talk a bit later, I think, about the family of 42001, because I guess there's an argument as to why not have it as an extension of 27, but it is a very separate discipline and a very family of standards. And there are other standards in that that framework. So yeah, in terms of benchmarking, there's a lot you can do, but there are obviously specifics to 42001. There's 34 controls, I think, in an annex, so very similar to 27001.
Annex A. I think quite often as well, just if I can check in with PAS 99, a lot of clients are going for this. They do need the individual certificates because they're using them for tenders. They're using them for evidencing their competency in those areas. One of the wider issues with PAS is that the tender says you need 9001 and 14001. They won't accept it. So it's a really good structure, but I think Annex SL as well provides that, and that's what we've followed. I don't know if that's answered it, sorry, or just gone around the houses, but hopefully that gives it some context.
No worries. Trish, let us know if that answered your question. Obviously, if you have any more further questions, please put in the chat. And just to say, everyone here, please throw in the questions. That's why Rob, Paul, and Adrian are here for the answers, all your questions about 42001, not other things. That'll be the next webinar. But Rob, do you want to go about your last point before we move on to the next section, or do you want to go to the next section? Entirely up to you.
Well, I think so. In our notes, we talked about shadow AI. I'll do a little bit of this. I'll pass it to Adrian, who maybe has more to say on it. But from my perspective, the real crossover I've seen from our clients is, firstly, AI is already out there. So, you know, there's no point having a policy that people can't use AI, because that's going to be very hard to enforce. It's already available through Microsoft and through Google and through even things like Canva, where you can design your posters. It's all in there already. So we can't ignore it. We need to manage it and manage it ethically. And the big crossover I've seen with other standards is within ISO 27001, there's a control for use of cloud services. Now, obviously, not all AI is cloud services, and not all cloud services are AI, but there's definitely a crossover there in terms of trying to discover what people are using in the business so you can manage it. And I think from that perspective, I think you have to have kind of an amnesty and an honesty sort of box, and allow people to come forward with what they're using now so that you can manage it in the future. But yeah, Adrian, you've probably got some better insights.
Yeah, sure. And to your point, Robert, looking at AIs, and whenever I audit a company, it's typically around 27001. As part of the leadership interview, I'll always ask a question about, for example, sustainability, what your stance is on that. And I will always ask around AI, and every CEO or CTO, they always have an opinion on AI, and they all have a stance that AI is something that most of them want to embrace it, but they do understand on the flip side there are risks around that. The good thing, going back to the standard, it gives you the ability to proper establish a proper AI management system, implement it properly, the day-to-day management of it, and also to continually improve the management system. And you can't do that without the standard. They always start again with AI and understanding that it's part and parcel of business now. Every person I speak to, they've all taken a stance. So at the very least, started with an AI policy to at least govern how AI will be used. I know Robert and Paul, you touched on Ghost AI, at least, you know, taking an inventory of what AI they have hidden in the background. So effectively, it's so crucial.
And I think that one, the amnesty phrase is the best one. It's just ask honestly, when are you using it? Because if someone, we've had a few companies say, we don't use any AI. I guarantee you do. And if you don't, it's being used unknowingly. And I think the thing that we realized very soon into the journey was that it was all great asking everyone what they were using and an amnesty, but then we needed to give them a tool, a decent tool that would replace some of the uncontrolled AI that was being used. So this won't be the right for everyone, but for us, we chose to go down use Copilot because we're very much a Microsoft business. We gave everyone Copilot. We can control it to a degree, you know, much better. It's a decent tool, so there's no need for people to go elsewhere. So that was one of the first sort of lessons. And sorry if I'm jumping around a bit. I think, yeah, you have to understand where you're using it, but you also have to give everyone within the business a workable solution if you're going to ask them to stop using the other bits. But it is, but we still, and I'm sure everyone listening here gets emails which have clearly been written by AI, lots of bold text, lots of hyphens, all the key giveaways. And who's writing that? Where is it getting the information from? How valid is that? Is a question businesses need to be asking themselves, because there is a real risk that members of your team could be giving incorrect information because they're assuming that what AI is telling them is right. And again, jumping around, but that getting Copilot for us was a big deal, and that really helped things because we had the amnesty, we looked at what it was, we looked at a solution that could replace everything, and then we were in a position to say to the team, right, we need you to stop using the free version of ChatGPT. Please don't use the AI in the PDF reader, because again, that's just uploading all that information, potentially, you know, valuable IP to who knows where. Yeah, and that's really helped, and that helped very much with the auditing process as well, where we could say to you, look, there's not loads here, we've shrunk it right down and we can control what we are using. I think that's a big takeaway from us.
At this point, though, there is a question. It doesn't necessarily link with some of the points discussed, but I think it's still relevant. If we're happy to take for it, it's from Nick, and I'll read it out for everyone involved. Say some AI tools providers have been caught changing terms and conditions where something allows them to have access to your content for training and sharing purposes. Is there any guidance in 42001 on how to deal with these rare instances? Should this be recorded in a risk management document?
I think that's a really good point. I saw Nick's question come up. Thank you, Nick. And I think it does relate to what we're talking about here in terms of third parties, actually, because firstly, yeah, absolutely. Personally, I would raise that as a risk. Anything that you're worried about should go on the risk register. You can always manage that down to an acceptable level, but it's good to have it in view rather than not. I'm not sure what Paul and Adrian would think of that. But also, for me, it's a supplier management issue, right? So the same way that you would look at your terms and conditions on other cloud services and have a process for reviewing those regularly. I feel like it falls into that area. I think risk management, the risk assessment is probably where it lives, but there is a control in 42001 around suppliers, and that talks about, and I am reading it here because I haven't memorized it yet, but it talks about making sure that the supplier services aligns with the organisation's approach to responsible development and use of AI. So, you know, if they change their terms and conditions, does that still align with your policy, your responsible use and development of AI? So, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys take on that one?
As a good example, it's a really good question. I got an email. We had a consultant that helped us with this. and he's just sent an email today saying, just to let you know, ChatGPT's moved to 5.2. So I'm just reading the actual address. This addresses safety issues within 5.1, and he's sent us the system card to tell us what those changes are, and we need to go and have a look at that. And we need to look in there to make sure it's not suddenly saying, and we're going to share your information, or there's a fundamental change. And if there is, exactly as Rob says, we need to go back to the risk register, we need to reassess it, we need to look at what we're doing. But it goes back to that point, having just one AI tool, much easier to track that than having lots and lots used across the business. Yeah, that's a really good example there of change that's come in because ChatGPT is built into Copilot. We need to know about that, we need to look at it, we have to take the responsibility for it. And I think that's something you'd expect, Adrian, I'm sure, as an auditor to come in, you'd want to know that we had somewhere keeping up to date with this sort of thing.
100%, Paul. And if you consider, for example, the standard we all know and love, ISO 27001, where one of the key aspects is to your assets before you can sort of risk management. You need to identify all assets that you have so that you can sort of manage them and put some sort of risk framework around it. In a way, it's the same in AI. You need to know before you can sort of manage. You need to know exactly what you have, what obligations, what service providers, and if it means managing, reaching out to these service providers and understanding exactly what these tools do and so forth in order for you to manage. I mean, we all need to see that as evidence. So 100% right, I agree with you.
For judgment, we keep talking about ISO 40001 matters, or do we go on to our AI landscape and the AI family? How do you?
I think from my side, with 42 matters, it's not a standard you can just tick box, or we never advocate that anyway, but it is something, if you're going to do it properly, and it becomes very useful. And it is probably out of all the standards that we go for, the biggest eye opener for us, where we realise where things were happening. So I think it matters because AI is here to stay. And if we don't deal with it, we're going to find ourselves like the barrister who put in a court case with some completely, AI had hallucinated lots of evidence. Like there's so many instances coming out into the news every day of people getting caught out on this. So it matters because this is here. It's a significant, substantial change to the way we're going to do business going forward, and we've got to manage it. But yeah, that would be my final point on that.
Perfect, right, and then we'll move on to the next topic as well. We're going to discuss is the AI family, and more specifically the AI landscape. So Adrian, want to take that away?
Sure. So in our previous sort of webinar, I sort of used the analogy of AI being as a family, if you will, because I was really talking about the applications. There's so many different applications of AI. We all know, obviously, ChatGPT being the catalyst, if you will, for generative AI, and this is what people engage with on a day-to-day basis. But there are other aspects such as robotics. There's on a deeper level, we've got reinforcement learning, there's deep learning, autonomous beings, reinforcement learning. So there's so many different areas and aspects. So each, going back to the standard, each which regardless of however AI is utilized, the standard will give organizations an opportunity to sort of see what they are, what they do, and how to manage it. And it really goes to the question. I think one of my colleagues was talking about the other day. We talked about the different roles and responsibilities, but different roles that are prevalent, such as AI providers, AI producers, customers, partners, subjects, authorities, etc. And it's important to understand what the organization is, what their application of as AI, what tool they're using, and what risk around that. One of the key areas we touched on this week was the importance of an AI impact assessment. And so whatever your application of AI, how is that impacting the outside world? Who is it impacting, and so forth? So that's really a roundabout way of talking about the AI family, if you will.
Well, it's probably, I was thinking about the AI standards. So 42,006, 42,005. I know you've done a bit more on that than us, so I might just throw you under the bus there and get you to you to talk about those ones a little.
Any time for no, I'm happy to pick that up. Yeah, we touched on it earlier about why wasn't it an extension to 27,001? Why is it a separate family? And I don't know the exact reasons. I'm not involved in ISO as a body, but there are other standards coming through within 42. So 42,005 is the guidance on impact assessments. We won't spend too much time on it here because just like other guidance standard, it's not, I think Adrian might agree, it's not part of the certification process, not part of the system, but it is useful to sometimes go into those guidance standards to get a better idea of what you can do in terms of best practice. And the impact assessments, I think, are coming through more in terms of managing regulatory and legal requirements elsewhere, which I know we touch on later as well. So yeah, 42,005, if you're really interested in this stuff, is one to look at. And 42,006 is recently published this year, and that's the rules around certification of the system. So I think that's possibly, again, I'm not involved in UCAS at all, but possibly I'd imagine that's why there's a slight delay from UCAS in progressing the accreditation, because those rules, those guidelines hadn't been published yet. But obviously that's coming through now, and I know NQA are on the pilot and will be one of the first, I'm sure, to get the accreditation. Yeah, that's all I'll say on that. It's not really what we're here to discuss.
I would just add, you mentioned a couple of times, you know, possible just as a bolt-on for 27, and perhaps I had more of that feeling when we started the journey. Now we've not finished it at all, but we've got the certification. We've passed the start line. It's a standard in its own right. To bolt it on, there's so much more to it, and that's been the real eye-opener the whole way along, how much AI really is impacting us and how many different things there are to control and to consider. And that 42,005 was really useful, because the impact assessment, again, is not just a light touch. It's something you really need to be honest about in the business. You know, genuinely, what are the impacts, rather than writing something nice for the auditor for ISO. It's going to become very clear if that's the approach, but that's a useful tool to get that right. And I think if you get that right, and I'll talk about this more in a bit, but the other elements of the standard come together much more easily as you go through it. So it's yeah, definitely a standard in its own right. I can get some of the team that did the work. They've got a few more grey hairs, but they'll yeah, testament to that.
Okay. Anything more on the topic before we move on to the next point?
All good from me.
All good, perfect. Right, now we move on to another topic, so the key roles in the AI ecosystem. So I think Adrian, that's your show.
Yeah, sure. So as I was alluding to earlier on around the sort of different roles, and I think it's key. I think one of the I was talking to my colleague about this yesterday. So we were fortunate to have been part of a major pilot this week, Robert alluded to, for a company who are pursuing AI certification. And the key ones areas were around their scope, who they were, again, what they did, and they had to define how they used AI. So I thought a few questions have really come up around the typical roles. And so AI provider is typically where you have sort of OpenAI or Google, Microsoft, and that's an AI provider. That's for definition. AI producer is when you utilize those you use AI to detect or create a model, if you will. So if you're a model creator, for example, if you're a bank and you created your own fraud detection model, for example, you would be an AI producer. When you have an AI customer, which is with organizations, let's say, using chatbots or forecasting tools, and when you have AI subjects, anyone subjected to decisions made about them via AI tools. So for example, if you're subjected to applying for a loan and your loan is declined, there could be a situation around bias there. It could be an unfair model. So it might be an accurate model, but it might be an unfair model. It could be because of bias, and hence the reason why controls are in place to ensure that bias becomes, and safety is a major area. So determining the actual role is crucial when it comes to managing your aims. Hope I've answered the question there.
You have. There was another question actually from Marie, actually, linked into, well, the question is, do either of you have 27701 pins? I'm not entirely sure what they mean in that context, but Marie, if you give more context about the question, we can expand on it.
Yeah, perhaps it's about the integration between the two. So 27701 is the privacy information management system. So for privacy information, so that's a good example of an area that it was an add-on, a bolt-on to 27001, but the latest edition of that standard is now a standalone management system. I won't go too far into it because we are getting a little bit off the AI topic, but absolutely in the same way that you could integrate any of your other management systems, I definitely think there's a crossover where you're managing the privacy of people. Yeah. There's got to be a crossover with the AI use, and as Adrian was just saying, in terms of your roles and that AI data subjects you mentioned there, Adrian, it's obviously very akin to PII, isn't it?
100%, Rob. And to your point, I think that crucial add-ons for me would be 27001, which obviously the security element, but 27701, as you mentioned, privacy, key, quality obviously gives it assurance to customers. And again, I think Paul alluded to environmental. They're all key add-ons, and I think that the good thing about the standard, you are able to manage all of them within your frameworks.
I think, on that with the access to data, Copilot set up incorrectly can give every member of your team access to every single document in your business. It could very easily make a mistake there, just setting it up incorrectly. So without a shadow of a doubt, all this stuff really overlaps, and that's only going to continue. So I think that's, definitely. We haven't integrated those two yet. I mean, 42 is so new. This is the reason we went for this. One of the key things was to learn, to get the competency, to be able to say to our clients, we've been on the journey ourselves, we've been through it, we're practicing what we preach, because it's very difficult, I think, to offer consultancy. Rob, you've worked with lots of clients, you've built your experience up there. We didn't have that, so we've built it up through going through competency, but we're all going through the journey ourselves, but we're all looking to how we can build that experience. And the more we do, the more we're going to learn, and the more we're going to see how those crossovers come into play. And also, I think with any new standard, when it comes out, we're all a bit unsure. Guaranteed what's best practice one day will become standard practice within 6 months. Yeah. So I think, we went through the audit process successfully, really proud of that. I would imagine that with our first surveillance, we're going to have to do a lot of work, because the targets will continue, or the standards will continue to, the expectations within the standards will continue to move forward as Adrian, yourself and your colleagues go out there and you see examples of best practice, example of what's doing, that tends to feed in. So there's going to be more opportunity, more learning for all of us. Sorry, rather rambled one.
We definitely learned a lot of lessons from those early days, and when the standard first came out, we got our consultants into a meeting and we went through it line by line. And I can tell you the decisions that we were making then at the start, our perception of it is completely different now that we've done it with some clients and we found and learn those lessons. So definitely a process there. I was just going to touch back on the roles in the systems, because a really good overview that Adrian gave there, and it's you may, I guess, have multiple roles, right? Because in some AI systems you might be the subject, whereas other systems you are the producer or maybe the provider, and that kind of dovetails into some discussions we've had previously with you, Paul, about the scope and getting the scope right early on. That's something we found with our customers, but you've got first-hand experience of this, right? In terms of, I don't know if it fits in this section, so we've gone off track. But
no, but it's a good point, and it's something we initially, when we filled in the application form, used the scope basically taken from our existing standards management system, and it ended up back and forth a lot, shall we say, much more detail. I think we've probably ended up with something that's more complicated than it needs to be, but it is an area where expect to have discussions with the certification body. It's a learning process of where that the level of detail. So ours is more like a paragraph over a sentence, which we would normally have. I'd expect to see that come down a little bit going forward. But yeah, it definitely wasn't a clear cut and perhaps a straightforward, and it took a lot of thinking and us really, again, looking inwardly and honestly about how we're using AI and what our scope was going to cover. And I think when we went into it, very different perspective and expectations from what we came out with. The outcome we're really pleased with, and I think it's so good to have that control. It gives me a lot of confidence. I like to run the business in a way where I can sleep at night, and this is another one of those things that just helps because I know what's happening, I know where it's being used, I know where the risks are and how we're managing them. But it was a real eye-opener. I think I'll keep repeating that point throughout this, but a very interesting journey.
Amazing, perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Can we go into regulatory and political context? Like Adrian, again, you're starting off these conversations, like starting on that a whole conversation about it. So go ahead, please.
Sure. So I think in our previous webinar, and I did talk about the sort of political and regulatory landscape, and I think the key regulator that comes to mind is the EU AI Act, and that's potentially it's a major act. I think the good thing about it is that they sort of look at the laws, and they look at about, I think there's 4 different types of risk that are considered, and they're around low risk, sort of minimal risk, high risk, and unacceptable risk, and it's all around the applications of AI. I think it's important to understand that if you develop a tool, that tool can have extraterritorial reach, and it could be subjected to the EU AI Act. So I think it's key to understand what the obligations are from that perspective, and if you consider going back to the standard, but the context, when you're understanding the interested parties or the actual regulatory requirements, the standard will give businesses opportunity to be able to understand what these legal obligations are.
And just from my perspective, although there's not a huge amount there yet, I think we can all be pretty confident in saying there's going to be a lot more legislation coming. There's going to be a lot more control. This is the beginning of it. Yeah. But also, without much being in place, 42 has a really important role in showing that's beyond legislative compliance. We're seeing it come through in RFPs, in proposals. What's your AI policy? How's it managed? Are you using it in the project? Well, without too much legislation, just at this point, 42 becomes a really good tool for showing proper controls. And as that legislation comes through, which it undoubtedly will, 42 gives you that platform to manage it and manage it well with confidence. So it's useful in both contexts.
Yeah, I would agree with that, guys. I think there's obviously more to come on this. It's a fast-moving environment, so things are changing quite quickly. In the UK at the moment, my understanding is there's no single legislation in the UK, not the same way we have the EU AI Act, but it's dealt with by regulators mostly. And there's this a white paper came out some time ago from the government, and they had this pro-innovation principles-based approach, which is an interesting term, isn't it? But I think that means let's see how it goes and let the regulators, which would be the ICO, Ofcom, I guess maybe FCA, CMA, others like that, let them sort of see how to manage this. There is, just for clarity, there's a private members bill going through the House of Lords, which is the Artificial Intelligence Regulation Bill. I'm reading that off the screen here. But who knows what will happen with that? And obviously, private members bill, they don't often get enacted. But something to look at. I know ourselves, and I know you, Paul, over at Advisor, maintain legal updates and legal registers. So if you can find us somewhere online or on socials, then let us know, and we'll keep you updated on those things as we find out. But we're monitoring it the same as everything else. Exactly as Paul said, in the absence of a clear legal framework, 42001 is perfect, and customers and buyers, I think, are going to start asking for details of what you're doing, not just the fact you've got a tick in a box, but can you show me your impact assessments? You know, what risks are there in your tool? So this standard will give you all the answers because you've already answered them.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, I think trust is such a big subject in AI, trustworthy AI, AI safety, and again, just talking about the fact that for the trust and credibility an organization, you need to be aligned with the standard, really, regulatory alignment, and to just reduce that legal risk and liability. So I can't press it more.
We do have two questions before we move on to the next topic. We can tackle those first, if that's okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so the first one's from Trish as well. Copilot gives access to all docs in the business. Do you have any suggestions on a cost-effective approach to manage this, i.e. access control akin to how we control access to the networks?
One for you, Paul.
I don't know if it is actually. Say the question again, sorry. Would you mind running through it again? I'll see if I can.
Of course, no worries. So Trish said, Copilot gives access to all documents in the business. Do you have any suggestions on a cost-effective approach to manage this, such as an access control akin to how we control access to the networks?
Okay. When I say it can give access, it will only give access when set up correctly to the bits that people have access to. So, for example, our consultants can't access the HR documents, but our ops director could and can get into them. So it's not that it does just give open access to everyone for every document. It has the potential to, and then it's just the configuration of it. So there's no extra cost. If you're using something like SharePoint to manage access already, it will follow that. So that's one of the things when we looked at different AI tools, we were looking at some third-party providers. So we've somewhat sold ourselves to Microsoft here anyway, but having that it was all fully integrated anyway, it's fully integrated into documents, it automatically did the access control with some checking and management from us. So that, I think, cost effective, as in there was no additional cost required. I don't know if I brilliantly answered that, and Rob and Adrian, please, have you got anything else to add?
Yeah, and to your point, and we mentioned this about the integration of other management systems. So the good thing, again, going back to the integration, so bringing in the ISO 27001, it already has so many different controls around sort of protecting or preserving the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data. So that can fall within that net controls around that within the integration of bringing in ISO 27001. So the good thing about these controls already exist, but with the integration of them, then your aims becomes much more robust.
We did have to put our hand in our pockets a little bit to upgrade the whole team to Copilot Pro, so there was an expense there. You can still manage it with the more general Copilot, but it gave us that ability to access the knowledge and IP that we've built up as a company over the years, as well as the internet. But it was more the configuration. I think that's getting that right is reduces the risk. The best approach.
Amazing, perfect. I'm just looking at the time we have here. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to ask one more question, and then we'll move on to the next topic. I think the links are best with just the regulatory and political stuff. So Marie says, just to be clear, does ISO 42001 meet the requirements of the EU AI Act, or are these areas not fully covered?
It's sorry, please.
No, you first. It's just more area.
The fact is, it goes back to the point about being able to using the management system to be able to manage these risks, to identify what these regulations are, having the right people managing. And so for example, the EU AI Act, if you were going to consider that, you'd have someone from legal understanding the legal around that. It would be, but the main thing is you've already managed that by understanding who the interested parties are, what their legal requirements are, having someone assigned to managing that key area. The management system enables you to be in a position where you identify the risk and manage them. It's not going to solve all the problems. You have to be the way it's an active management system, which enables key actors to get involved and to manage these potential risks. I hope that
Yeah, I think you can. A management system can never mean that you are compliant, because you have to be compliant all the time. But a management system gives you the tools to be compliant. And yes, there's an awful lot of crossover. Should there be a breach, should there be a problem, you can show you were following best practice. You had everything. You know, you mitigated the risk to an acceptable level. Risk is always there. We can't get rid of risk entirely. But if there were to be a problem, you were doing everything within the act. You're controlling it, and it still went wrong, and that puts you in a much better position, I think, than just saying, oh, we didn't have anything in place, sorry, and someone just chucked it all on a free version of ChatGPT, which is why we got in trouble. So yeah, it definitely helps in a very big way.
Yeah.
Perfect. Karen and Brian, you do have two questions. I do see them. I just want to give the gentleman on the call just every time to finish up their point. So I'll let you go on to the next point, and if we have more questions, we'll go back to your questions, Kevin and Brian. So apologies for that. But we'll start off with the next topic, which I believe is just scrolling up, is how ISO 42001 differs from other ISO standards. So Rob, I think you're starting.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, yeah, in terms of the standard, as we say, there's lots of similarities. Obviously, there are some differences. So the core around it, I think you would say, is the risk assessment and the impact sort of analysis, impact assessment that you need to do. And those tools, those two exercises drive, in my opinion, drive kind of the whole system. And in the same way, it makes the system really relevant to you as a user, because you're adapting the requirements to meet your needs. I mentioned those controls in Annex A earlier. I think there's 34 of those. So if you're familiar with 27001, you'll recognise that approach. You bring the controls in to treat those risks and to work on the impacts and manage the impacts. If you're not familiar with 27001, that is slightly different. In a way, I quite like that, because by having a bit more detail and a bit more direction on what you're meant to be doing in those controls in that annex, it makes it a little bit easier, I think, to implement and run. Whereas some of the other standards, not that there's anything wrong with them, but they're broader, and you have to do a lot more thinking for yourself, which, depending on the day of the week and how much coffee you've had, is not the best idea. Yeah, Adrian or Paul.
Yeah. And it's worth saying that there's a new, entirely new categories of risk or issues, if you like, unique to ISO 42001. So with 42001, we've got the AI lifecycle controls. So we're talking about from data training, validation, deployment. We've got this sort of bias and fairness as other areas, it's assessments around that. It gives actors the ability to participate in those sort of activities. We talked earlier on around AI AI fairness. That includes sort of explainability, transparency requirements, which were all key requirements, even in the EU AI Act. It's mentioned around transparency is a key word. Human oversight mechanisms, something Paul touched on, being able to be in control of understanding what's going on and not being sort of led by all of the different ghost, i.e. AI issues. We've talked about sort of drift, model drift, degradation over time, and retraining controls, and AI specific incident management. So these AI introduces so many different risks and different threats. So you need a management system to be able to tackle what these risks are and manage it. So you need AI management system to be able to deal with these new category of risks that I mentioned.
The only thing I would add is the impact assessment is new, it's something different, and it's critical, and you have to do that to be able to go on to do the risk assessment, which is more integrated with the other standards. So that element of it was something which was a real learning curve for us, definitely stands outside. And as you mentioned, the life cycle perspective, so akin to 14001 there, but looking at how you're going to manage this right the way through the life cycle is something you don't perhaps do in some of the other standards as much. But otherwise, lots of overlap, lots of integration opportunities, lots of efficiency opportunities. So conscious of time, you can see this, we're spending too much time on this already. It shows you how big a subject is, how much you can there is to look at.
Perfect. What we'll do is I think we'll have the next 5 minutes or so go into one of the later sections. There are other sections we want to discuss, but we'll give as much time as possible for that. So what we'll do is discuss common audit findings from the group, and then we'll leave the last 5 minutes for questions before we finish off at 12. Sound like a plan, everyone?
Sounds good.
Perfect. Well, Adrian, I think that's again you starting off the conversation.
Sure. I think sort of key areas. It's a new management system, so I guess I think it's important to know every management system there are core areas of risk, and we've mentioned them, areas of focus and control. So we've talked about transparency, risk around explainability, ensuring that you have a trustworthy model. I think it's important for organizations to determine their scope correctly, understanding we touched on it earlier on, what the role is, how they use AI, and being able to have that set in stone, understood and documented. I think that sort of key areas, if an organization doesn't understand that, I think it could lead to problems. I think, again, ensuring that AI impact assessment is done properly. I think Paul alluded to that earlier on, but that's crucial. And I think so. Not doing those key things, I think, can be an issue going forward. But please, over to you, Paul.
I mean, I think Rob's probably got more experience with this, but we can. One thing I was going to say is it's not just about addressing the clauses, we found addressing them in order. So doing that proper, what AI are you using, then doing the impact assessment, then doing the risk assessment. And if you don't do it in that order, your risk assessment is going to be off because you're not assessing the real risks in the business. You can't do an impact assessment unless you've really understood. So there is an order to these things, and done out of order, I think you definitely raised the risk of findings. For us, training was one. Training and competency. It's hard because this is so new. So you can't sit there and say, "Oh, I've got 10 years experience of doing this," because no one has. So that was definitely an area to look at, looking for training, finding some online courses and communication internally for the team, discussions, but that had to be navigated. So that, yeah, but that doing it in order thing, I think, is where if you don't, you could full fail when you get to the certification audit.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, Paul. I think the way the standards are written these days is quite nice, isn't it? It does step you through from understanding the context of your organisation all the way through to the improvement cycle, which takes you back round again to the top. So yeah, I'd agree with that. And you know, as we spoke about before, what we found with our clients, or with the certification bodies, really that audited our clients, it was the competence thing they really were worried about and wanted to make sure that everyone involved in it, you know, not just the people running the system, the management system, but the people that are engaging with the AI or using the AI, you know, what were their competencies, how could we prove it, how could we define what those competencies should be, and then taking actions to deliver on those. And as Paul said, it's quite a new area, AI, so there's, you know, it's hard to find particular kind of trustworthy, recognised kind of qualifications and stuff like that. So you need to look at other ways of proving or delivering on competence. As I'm sure we all know, if we're all standards people, the standards don't say it has to be training. It doesn't have to be formal training necessarily. Obviously, that's a nice way to do it. You know, I'm sure NQA and others offer courses that you can take, but there's other ways as well to prove competence. The other two things really quickly, just to share some lessons learned from our side and from dealing with clients. Monitoring, I find, is quite an important aspect. And one thing, although it's not in the standard explicitly, I think it's useful to have some kind of steering group or ethics committee or some meeting of the key stakeholders to look at AI issues, because it is a fast-moving area. Technologies are changing, so you want to be discussing this quite regularly. And that actually kind of leads on to my other point, which is one of the things I like about the standard is it mandates a method of people reporting concerns, not just internally, but ideally publicly, or users of the system that might have a concern about your AI use or your AI platform product, having a route for them to report issues, and then that needs to go somewhere. So again, I kind of feel like a steering group, an ethics committee, or whatever you call it, is a perfect place to put that. And they're the sort of things that, you know, as we said, reading that standard on a page is one thing, but actually putting it into real life, they're the things that I would look at personally.
Yeah,
with that one, we use forms. So Microsoft Forms, we put a link on the website and anyone can go on there. And please, can't see how many people, so I'll get that many questions about AI. But yeah, anyone can go on there and raise something. They can raise it confidentially. They don't need to share the details. And that was, yeah, again, something that had to be navigated through. So really good point.
Yeah, I think I agree with both points actually, and I think a company will need a diverse team of all different types of characters, such as data scientists, project managers, someone looking at ethics from an ethical standpoint, someone from legal, and again, as to Robert's point, there needs to be a feedback loop so that a company understands how the AI is being used and continually monitoring, measuring, and having metrics around what success looks like, and ensuring that not just accuracy, but fairness, transparency, explainability are all areas that are covered and literally measured.
Perfect, right. I'll just move this across so we can see everything. But I think, yeah, that might be towards the end of the webinar, but I'll go back to the two individuals who have been waiting very patiently for their questions to be answered. And I will start off with Karen in terms of, apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I believe they said, what is the uptick of ISO 42001 looking like in the UK? There are many companies seeking accreditation, and given it is a fast-moving topic, at what point would you advise looking into this if the stand is likely to be subject to changes / updates?
Right. Let me take this one first, because I saw Karen's message, and I think that's a really valid point. So in terms of uptake, I think there's a lot of interest in it. I think we've been delayed slightly because of the lack of accredited certification from UCAS, which I can understand why they might have taken longer, but obviously often the incentive is to move towards certification. And within that, I would say mostly the people that we're talking to and we're working with are those system developers, rather than people that are just using AI at the moment. I think it will filter down. I think it will grow. So there's quite a bit of interest, and I completely understand the concern about when is the right time to do this. I actually think now is the right time, because now we've got accreditation in place, the standards have been published. Generally, I think they're on a 5-year cycle. I know Adrian, you might know, but generally ISO will review them on a 5-year cycle. So we've got plenty of time before the next one comes out. And on top of that, there's normally a transition period in terms of certification. So, if you're certified today and a new one comes out tomorrow, obviously Adrian and all the team there need to upskill and get ready for the new versions. That takes time, and you get 3 years on top of that. So, so I certainly wouldn't delay it waiting for a new version. There of course will be a new version, but it's not going to be anytime soon. And what we've got now is really good. That was just my perspective on it.
And if I can jump in there, you're right. We chose to go through ANAB, but we will move it to UCAS as soon as we can. But the reason was we wanted to get in, we wanted to be early adopters, and we wanted to learn and have the competencies. So, but I think, yeah, we're going to see early next year NQA, and I think there's at least 14 other cert bodies going through the process. That's when the noise is going to start. There's going to be lots of noise about it. We're getting interest, we're having lots of conversations. We're speaking to quite large law firms because it's so embedded in what they're doing now. And I think it's more that people are beginning to realise how much AI is in their business and how they don't have any control. So my expectation, and obviously where we put our, we've invested in this, is that it's going to take off. It's going to become I think a very key standard.
We have time for just maybe one question from Brian, just as well. So I'll give Brian the opportunity. Have you seen any insurance companies or insurance cover of organizations being changed because of the use of AI, or being impacted by not having something like ISO 42001 accreditation?
Not directly. I don't know if that will happen. I know a lot of insurance companies are using AI, and then they've got lots of risks of their own. I mean, Adrian, you touched on the bias that's built into these indirectly or accidentally. I haven't seen any insurance reductions. We haven't approached our insurance company yet to see if we can get anything off, but I think it all helps. For us, it's much more the opportunity to be able to work with clients and give them competency and peace of mind. So, but yeah, no, unfortunately, I haven't really had an experience of that with the other standards as well. I don't know if you guys have.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they did.
I would say to that point, if one is using AI, especially as a decision-making autonomous, they need a management system, because it could be akin to a one-way train if they don't have controls in place. That's one thing I would say to that.
Yeah, just on that point, I think you made that really well, Adrian, that for me, it's about defending the claim is what ISO 42 gives you, some defence if it were to happen. But as similar to Paul, it's an interesting one for me, the insurance, because having these standards should and does reduce the risk, but I never really see it come through on insurance cover that they'll reduce your premiums if you're certified, unfortunately. But I do think there's some defence against a potential claim there if you've got a system in place and you've done everything you can. I think that's the benefit, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to help with that.
Amazing. Well, I can't think of a better way to end the webinar. So, but thank you all three of you for your time today. I think that was a wonderful conversation, discussing that in more detail. We didn't have lots more to talk about, but there was so much things you can discuss in an hour with some really good questions. And there was some really excellent questions as well that really sort of delved into a variety of different topics in detail. As you might have seen in the chat, NQA does offer training in ISO 42001. So just some of the discussions about the training, and I've already had that as well. So if you do have any itch to scratch for training needs, please check that out as well. And NQA actually will be launching a couple of new trainings on ISO 40001 in the new year, on introduction courses and some implementation courses as well, and hopefully in some shape or form. So check that out in Q1 2026. But at least now we are 1 minute over, so I apologize for that. I hope every one of you has a lovely lunch as well deserved. And thank you once again to Robert, Paul, and Adrian for that time today.
Very welcome. No, thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Perfect. Well, I'll end the webinar now, and the recording will be sent out. And I thank everyone for their time today. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.